fatal flaw at the core of capitalism was Karl Marx, who as early as the 1860s developed, oh, hang on, I've got to click on this thing, developed the concept of the dangerous metabolic rift that capitalism inevitably creates between humans and the rest of the natural world, which of course we are only a part of and on which our survival depends. He was particularly concerned about the responsibility existing societies had as regards future generations. And I think it was Tarsem who raised the issue of concern about his new grandchild. And it's worth quoting this particular thing, even an entire society, a nation, or all simultaneously existing societies taken together are not the owners of the earth. They are simply its possessors, its beneficiaries, and have to bequeath it in an improved state to succeeding generations. And although Marx's contribution on this vital aspect was developed by Engels after Marx's death, it was later largely ignored or even discarded by many socialists and even by Marxists. And this was particularly so within the Soviet Union under Stalin, with the expansion of production becoming by far the dominant goal. Well, we have the next image, please, Felicity. It should be a slide of William Morris.
Yeah.
Yeah, lovely. So more immediately, however, Marx's ecological views were taken up in the UK by William Morris, who, directly influenced by Marx, set up the Socialist League in 1884. Morris, like Marx, was deeply concerned about the increasingly destructive and polluting operations of capitalism, arguing instead for systems of production that would, and I quote, make no sordid litter, befoul no water, nor poison the air with smoke. Yet the Socialist League too was eventually overwhelmed by the productivist, non-ecological varieties of British socialism. The next image, please, Felicity. Thank you. Lovely. Sadly, for much of the last century, the paths of socialism and environmentalism tended to diverge, with socialists and environmentalists having little to do with each other. However, in the 1970s and 1980s, significant numbers of socialists in various countries, as well as continuing their struggles for a fairer and more equitable post-capitalist world, also began to return to the environmental concerns raised earlier by Marx and Morris. In particular, they developed a growing awareness that you can't have socialism on a dead planet. And as a result, new red-green politics began to develop. And this was largely the result of increasing awareness of the various pollutions and degradations that continuously increasing production was inflicting on the natural world. As well as emerging concerns over climate change, these harms included the increasing destruction of tropical rainforests, soil exhaustion, as the slide shows, increasingly unmanageable accumulations of wastes, and the pollution of seas, rivers, and lands. And the next one, please, Felicity. Lovely. Now, as we moved into the 21st century, there were increased attempts to develop a coherent eco-socialist response to the growing evidence of ecological devastation and increased societal tensions. As early as 2001, activists drew up the International Ecosocialist Manifesto, and this identified the continuous expansion and growth of the world capitalist system as the main dynamic driving the planet to the cliff edge of catastrophic breakdown. And after that manifesto, an eco-socialist approach was further developed in the following years. But more recently, economist Kate Raworth, who I don't think is an eco-socialist, but her groundbreaking book, Donut Economics, drew graphic attention to just how far several of the planet's safe boundaries were already being overshot. along with warnings of how dangerous and uncontrollable positive feedbacks could occur if certain tipping points were passed. Next one, please, Felicity. And last year, of course, the whole world received a devastating wake-up call regarding what happens when the planetary boundaries of the natural world are exceeded, COVID-19. As with the previous SARS and MERS epidemics, such zoonotic viruses cross over from wild animals to humans when the natural world is put under increasing pressure, whether it be from global heating or the destruction of natural habitats and biodiversity as a result of industrialized agricultural production. Eco-socialism is now the vital dual response to the interrelated and systemic crises facing humans and the rest of the natural world. The fight against environmental and climate breakdown has to be a central concern of all those who identify as socialists. While environmentalists and climate activists need to grasp that capitalism, the system that is driving all these ecological and climate harms, has ultimately to be changed by replacing it with something that will save the planet. And the last one, please, Felicity. It was that dual recognition and a growing sense of urgency that led Left Unity and the Green Party's Green Left to come together earlier this year to form the Ecosocialist Alliance, which was quickly joined by anti-capitalist resistance. Our statements to the G7 and COP26 received a lot of national and international support, and the hope post-COP26 is now to build on that to create a large and powerful eco-socialist movement involving broad coalition, climate groups, trade unions, and other civil society organizations in order to push for both the short-term and the long-term changes that are needed to avert catastrophic ecological and climate breakdown. Now, we hope that at least some of you will come and join us in that struggle, ideally as a member of Left Unity, but more importantly, as an activist in the struggle against climate breakdown and for eco-socialism. Now, in the chat function, I'll provide some book titles and links to articles for those interested in finding out a bit more about eco-socialism. That's me done. Thank you, Felicity.
Thank you.
That was
right.
bang on 10 minutes, that was. Well done.
Okay, well, I'll see, can I do mine in 10 minutes, but it's, I'm kind of taking over with this rather than one that's just been, I've just produced. I think what we've got here is examples of what's happening with the wildfires, with the extinction, and with things that Alan's also pointed out, the virus and the particular link to with the virus from intensive farming of animals, and particularly intensive farming of pigs and chickens, and that farming going into areas of land which has not previously been used for human agriculture. So the kind of curtain, if you like, that protected us from these viruses has been lifted. And the second picture I've got here really is from the idea of ecofeminism, that women are impacted by the climate crisis in many different ways. There's evidence that 4 times more women die in catastrophes like floods and fire than men die, and obviously children die as well. That we've got this whole experience. We know now that these catastrophic events are going to happen, and we need to be planning and preparing for them, but we can't plan and prepare for them with an autocratic government. It has to be done with the careful work of a community, and involving, in one of the sessions in Glasgow, one of the left SNP MSPs said we need a whole new form of democracy just to cope with the catastrophes that happen. And to give you a little idea on that, we've got the situation in Cuba. But because Cuba's in a hurricane area, they have to be prepared for it. But because they've got a government that's not based on profit, they also can do that. And they have local committees who meet. They meet regularly in their own areas, and they meet nationally to discuss the response to different catastrophes. Every household has a container, and in the event of a flood, their expensive materials get put into the container and therefore can withstand the damage that happens. But also everybody knows there's a list of who's there, what their health conditions are, who's got disabilities, who might need help to actually escape, and so on. It's organized, and Cuba's response is something that we have to learn from in all of the different countries about how that should work. The picture of the little conference with the left unity, with the European left badge, is from an eco-feminist conference that the European left organized 2 years ago, but that work on ecofeminism is being continued. And the slogan of "Destroy the patriarchy, not the planet" is obviously a crucial one. We've got the picture of Rosa Luxemburg, and I bring to this from Rosa Luxemburg her idea of primitive accumulation, that by simply robbing, you know, when colonizers went into countries and simply robbed the money, they took that wealth, and that led to their accumulation of wealth and their increased power. But that same thing is happening now across the world. Obviously we've got Greta, and she's younger there, isn't she? And the other kids fighting for the climate, which is a really important thing to have to do, to recognize that the youth are in this fight, very importantly in this fight. The second thing I'd like to take, apart from the the ecofeminism from this slide, I'd like to take from this slide as well the fact that we have to be aware that the weight of this catastrophe is already being felt in the global south. And just as they're dealing with it, they are being screwed for debts which they've been forced to take on by the IMF, by the World Bank, by the international community, and they cannot use their money that they need in order to either adapt or mitigate the situation, because their wealth has to go to pay the debts to the global north. So we have to be aware of the global south in all of this. I've put on here the key points that we need to be looking at. We need to be looking global and local. We've got to keep the fossil fuels in the ground. Got to work on just transition. We cannot have what happened to the coal fields of England to happen when coal mines are closed in other parts of the world. There's got to be mitigation. We've got to be putting stuff in to mitigate the disasters. Close to where I live, there's a very pretty little port called Park Gate. We know that within 50 years will be underwater, and it's beginning already to affect the house prices in that area. But that's how close we are. And when we were in Glasgow at some of the meetings in Glasgow, one of the meeting places literally was above the water. And they were saying that this building, which is above the water, will actually be under the water within a measurable period of time. And we've got to have the cancellation of the global unjust debt. We've got to have a food policy to feed the world and sustainably. And seriously, we should do a huge cheer for the Indian farmers who stopped the agribusiness moving in en masse into India. That was a year-long fight, and they've won it. So far, they've won it. And they're not messing around. They're not saying, okay, we've won, we're going back home. They're keeping mobilized. We've got to have a different kind of democracy. This is lose, really. We've got to end the deforestation, the tropical and boreal forests by reduction of demand for imported food, timber and biofuels. To keep ecofeminism alive, we've got to have an end to ecologically and socially destructive extractivism, especially in the territories of the indigenous peoples and the First Nations. Respect for economic, cultural, political and land rights of indigenous people, and an end to the primitive accumulation and robbing of the commons. This is really just to talk about this is the kind of treadmill work that many people have to do under pressure, forced to do it. And we can have a different kind of work. In our politics, we've got to be talking about different ways of using human labour power. These next few slides are chunks from the Ecosocialism declaration that we worked on. And we say another world is possible, but we have to have this massive mobilization. The mass of the working people across the world have to be involved in this. And when I was doing some work on something I wrote for this, something really stuck in my mind, and that is the figures show that more human beings have been involved in protest in the last 2 years than ever were involved in 1917 to 1919, than were involved in 1968, were involved in 1848. This is an age of protest. The protest might not be seen as much in Britain, but this is an age of protest. And this is one of the issues people are mobilizing around. And as we saw, one of the biggest working classes in the world in India mobilized on this issue this year. I think we've gone through most of these, but I'll leave these up so people can have a look at them if they want the recording of it. And, you know, like the oceans, we rise, we can't stop this happening. The oceans will rise, but we have to rise too, to use the human power to do it. So we demand a just transition. The reskilling of workers in environmentally damaging industries with well-paid alternative jobs. In France, until, I don't know if it's still true, but it used to be true, if you were made redundant in France, you got an automatic year's pay and you got access to education free. We have to have that kind of massive movement to allow people to change jobs and change jobs effectively. We want full and democratic involvement of workers to harness the energy and creativity of the working class. We want resources for popular education and enhancing a just transition with environmental education embedded into all the levels of the curriculum. Just watch as the government tries to take it out. I bet they will. Urgent development of sustainable, affordable, high quality, accessible public transport with comprehensive integrated plans which meet people's needs and reduces the requirement for cars. A planned eco-socialist economy which eliminates waste, duplication and environmentally harmful practices. That goes back to the William Morris statement. Work practices reorganised, and we put forward a vision of a just and sustainable world. And we organise and assist wherever possible workers and communities in this. And this is a demonstration of Bulgarian Bulgarian miners, sorry. What's happened is the government has said, as part of their, grand gestures to move towards a greener economy, they are going to close the mines. And this is just like Britain. This is huge areas where the mines are the core industry. The other industries are built around it. And we have to be working for this to be a just transition and be involved with the campaign for justice for the Bulgarian miners. These are the people who, these are the organizations. I haven't put the people who signed it separately. These are the organizations who joined the Ecosocialist Alliance in the sense of endorsing it publicly. When I was in Glasgow, I literally was stunned because this very young Korean girl comes up to me and says, we need discussions, comrades. So I met her twice and had long discussions about the situation in terms of eco-socialism in Korea, and then was invited to address their weekly meeting of members via Zoom. So it just pushed home to me how big and how serious this issue is. And certainly for all COP26, what the governments came out of it was not a success. For the mobilization of people, given all the constraints of COVID and how minimal people's delegations were there. The demonstrations of the children in Glasgow was absolutely huge. And the demonstration on the day, it was 100,000, and there were demonstrations across the world on the same day. So this is, I'm coming to the end, but this is the points I thought that we would, Francis was suggesting we would look at. What can we do to get our policies into the working class movements? Because it's got to be there in the workplaces. What can we each do as members of LU, as trade unionists, of activists, whatever we are? And how can we work both locally and globally? I'll finish on that. Thank you.
Thanks, Felicity. That was really good. Okay, who would like to speak? We have, let me see. It's 1 o'clock, you said, or did you say 12?
Yeah.
We have most of an hour, so I don't want to be too stingy with the time limits. Pardon?
It might. Penny, can you confirm the times?
Can't hear you, Penny.
I think we've got until 12:30.
Okay, so actually we have half an hour. So I'm gonna have to be stingy with the times and give people, say, 2 minutes. Is everyone okay with that?
Yeah.
Okay. So when you hear my phone blaring, then it's time to wrap up, please, friends and comrades. So who would like to speak?
Hi, Francis.
Half a mo. Okay.
Hello.
Hi, Lou, do you want to start?
Yes, I'll try and keep it brief because I'm aware we've only got a half hour now. With reference to the motions I presented yesterday, I think we agreed that they were going to be expanded on, discussed today, but it's probably easier for people just to read what I've written, and for me to add that these strategy documents that I've developed, I've done lots of research and I've developed these strategy documents for, in the first instance, for local authorities, and I'm sending them out to all the local authorities. And what they are is they're a series of strategies, one on transport, one on housing and land use, one on environmental protection, one on waste reuse, and there's another one. But they're all pulled together by, I'm not very good at this, but I'd like to be able to send these out to people, and I think that would be a useful thing to do. I'd also like to share at the end of this the references, which I'm sure, the references that were made earlier to documents, to literature, and can they be shared at the end? But I would like to share what I've written. I'd also like to say that I'd written, well, a book really, because I'm a writer and freelance journalist as well. But I've written a document called About Trees, and I'm using that to inform the strategies that, the strategy that I've written. So I'd like to share those somehow with everybody here and the wider, with Left Unity. That's all I've got to say. But it's all. But the main principle of what I've been, the main principle is about I'm not very good at this, so I'll just
well,
okay.
the trick is to actually just write 3 or 4 words down on a piece of paper, and then when you lose your place, you look at the piece of paper and go, oh yes. But
I've tried to do that.
It's not having either. Never mind. What just occurred to me is, funnily enough, we have a website, and I think we should have a Green Caucus working page on the website where we put all of this material with a little bit of introduction. I think that's possibly an action we need to take. Oh God, I said action as a verb. We need to take from this meeting. Activity we need to take from this meeting is have a word with. Is it Kate that manages the website, I think, or is it Penny?
Kate does most of it. I can dip in and out, so I can have a chat to Kate about that and see what's. So you're talking about the Left Unity website? Yeah,
have a Green Caucus working page which has all these materials on, and if and what also we can perhaps publish Lou's articles give her a platform to work from.
Right, thanks.
Because I think this material, as I said yesterday, Left Unity's thing is we're actually the intellectual conscience of a lot of the left, so we need to actually have the material where people can access it, don't we?
Okay.
Len, would you like to speak?
Yeah, I'll try and be fairly precise. I've put up some links of our activities in Wales. We describe Left Unity in Wales now as, and have done for a couple of years, as an eco-socialist party. So as far as we're concerned, whenever we mention workers, we also mention the planet. So it's important to do that politically. And you can see how that pans out if you've got a spare half hour to look through that stuff, which you probably haven't. Anyway, the key points in terms of taking things forward. We meet every fortnight as People's Assembly Wales through a Zoom, and it links up basically most of the active left in Wales. The issue of COP26 was a constant feature of discussion, and two of the areas which were, in terms of taking things forward practically, is a number of groups that were set up around COP26 are now turning into permanent groups to raise issues of direct relevance locally in terms of eco-socialism. So we're obviously encouraging and supporting that. And in relation to what Lou was saying, we're currently starting, in Wales, we have things called local development plans, and every council every 10 years has to draw up one. And once it's agreed these local development plans, they become the law, basically, in planning for the next 12 to 13 years. And that's what establishes land use, green, industrial use, and so on and so forth. And a consultation over the next 12 months is just starting on all the new local development plans. And so clearly this is going to be very, very important in terms of raising eco-socialist issues in terms of land use and how housing is built and so on and so forth. Very, very, very important process. And we're hoping that these local groups will be involved in that. And then just a final point. Overall, we've also found in Wales the idea of donut economics as an extremely important overarching conceptual guide to how we should relate to this issue as socialists, and in a sense, it's a guide to drawing up something which I know Bob's interested in as well. And he says we can, and the two Bobs, we can reform capitalism now. Is the idea of transitional demands stemming from that conceptual overview of a donut economy, of how we can raise demands which ensure that our activities stay within that without going over the edges in terms of that concept. So that's a sort of an overarching theme which we'll try to employ in terms of our specific activities. Here we are.
Okay, David Landau.
Yes, yes. Mine is a question really to Louise,
Okay.
and it's about trees and housing, because you graphically described the destruction of trees, the forests, and so on, for building. At the same time, we have been, the left has generally been, fighting and demanding for there being far more homes built, and so the question is how we marry these two things up, and I'm sure it's something your strategy documents will be
absolutely
engaging with, but that was my question.
Very much so. The housing and land strategy explains that. I mean, one of the things that I'm trying to if you like, explain within the Community Planning Alliance is that so far nobody has come to grips with the fact that we have a record number of empty homes, a record number of empty buildings, the unwillingness and well, again, it's market driven, isn't it? But the fact of the matter is there are 11 million empty homes across Europe. And instead of, well, I can explain that in the strategy document, but there's no contradiction between housing people and protecting our environment. And I have explained that, but we can discuss it here if you like. But as it's only one strand of our discussion, you know, it's up to other people if they want to discuss it. But yeah.
That's fine. Thank you. Oh, just hit the time of the Alan.
Yeah, just one suggestion that I think is important. I think Felicity drew attention to the massive amount of mobilization that there was in the lead up to COP26. And one of the gains from that mobilization is that they're now going to meet every year and see how they're doing rather than wait every 5 years. And with the urgency of it, that's important. So as one suggestion, I think it would be really good if we got ideas as how we can update our statement in preparation for putting pressure on the next COP, which will next year will be in Egypt, COP27. And as each year goes by, I think we just need to emphasize the urgency, so on. And because so many people were drawn in across the world for the preparation of COP26, I think that's a momentum that we need to keep going. That's me done.
Good point. Sorry, just not write that down. Yeah. Okay. Tarsam.
I think Stephen was before me, but I don't mind.
Stephen was indeed before you, Tarsam.
Yeah. You carry on, Steve. I'll go after you.
Right, thank you. Don't have time to introduce myself. Only got 2 minutes. We've not really got time to address what we do next in 21 minutes. I think that's a completely ridiculous idea. Obviously, we need to approach what we do next at various levels, including like nationally in the initiative with the Green Left and the anti-capitalist people. We need to talk how do we progress that. We need to talk how do we progress things internationally. And we also need to look at what we're doing locally, because a lot of this discussion is also, it seems to me, to be reiterating stuff that we really already know and not talking about practically how we're going to build a mass movement around this. And we might have a big movement in this country, and Felicity might well be right saying there's lots of people been demonstrating and protesting all over the world. But as I say, as I mentioned yesterday, realpolitik is where I live and how many people are interested in it, where I am, because at the end of the day, we're going to overthrow capitalism and take state power. One assumes we're going to do that locally as well, and without that, it's not going to really happen. So the approach we've taken locally is basically to establish a community association, set up ourselves a target of target 0 2030. We're planting trees, we're developing community renewables, we're talking to businesses and community groups and individuals about how we can reduce the carbon footprint from now to 2030 through various schemes which will involve everybody. And we're using that to gain the ear of people so that we can talk to them about broader issues and why ultimately at the end, in a much closer, obviously, discussions with people who are more interested than the general public, the need to overthrow capitalism at some point. And we try to develop our own sustainable community. We think that we might be successful enough that people might copy us. And that's, for me, how we're going to build up an eco-socialist movement in my locality. Most of the people in our group at the moment are ex-Labour Party people. So they're all basically left Labour people anyway. And I'll be measuring our success about how we grow from now till 2030. We will be supporting various demonstrations and things like that, but that's not the key thing for me. been involved in loads of direct action movements. I think they're appropriate at certain times, and I'll be supporting them. But I'll be concentrating on work on the ground, talking to people who live in my community area and trying to recruit them to the idea of building a sustainable community, which is, in my view, not far off what Gerard Winstanley argued, and he's in Wikipedia as one of the pioneer communists in Britain. So, you know, that's what I'll be doing.
Thanks, Stephen. Hello, Sam.
Hello, yeah. Just a few points. First thing I was thinking was there was this slogan going around about system change, which seemed quite all over COP26 in January. I think one of the things we can work on is trying to flesh out what that actually means. It's just used a bit generically. So we can start talking about system change, maybe even mention socialism, but definitely start talking about public ownership, taxes of the wealthy and carbon polluters, and investing in green renewables. The other thing was in terms of locally and globally, I think the angle about the global south is important here. Firstly, just to stress that imperialism, Western imperialism, is the extractionism and exploitation of the world is the root cause of a lot of climate change. And the other thing is making links between, say, in this country, also what Felicity was saying, you know, that the global south's on the front line of the climate crisis, but also in this country, making links through our anti-racist, sort of anti-imperialist sort of work. So what I mean by that, for example, is two things maybe. One is like a lot of the sort of BAME communities in this country, say like, for example, some African communities, some Bangladeshis, Caribbean communities, they will be affected in back home, like their communities. So when there's crisis going on in Bangladesh because of climate, we kind of reach out to the Bangladeshi communities here and make links and so forth, again with the Caribbean, the African, and the Indian farmers. It was a bit mooted, I thought, our response on the left of the Indian farmers, because it was a massive climate and also working class thing going on. And the other thing is racism. I mean, one of the things the climate crisis is also going to produce is a lot more racism. We're already seeing this at COP26, where there's finger pointing going on at India and China. And then also like with the AUKUS treaty, and there's a lot of xenophobia coming up, I think. And we've got to be prepared to that and work through that as well from a climate angle. The other thing also is class. I think one of the problems with the climate movement in this country is that it's still got a kind of middle class woolly image of sort of tree hugging, which puts a lot of working class people off. So we got to challenge that. And so for example, one of the things I was saying at COP26, one of the slogans, consume less. I mean, I get it, but that's really directed at wealthy Westerners. I mean, 3 million people in this country go to food banks. Are you going to tell these people to consume less when they can't even afford enough food to eat? And similarly, globally, like there's about 2.7 billion people, I think, go hungry every day. So slogans like consume less, we got to challenge the whole idea of, we got to bring a sort of class dynamic into it more. And finally, disabled people, yeah, I mean, as a disabled person, I always find that when I hear about flooding and crises in other country, like heats and droughts, I always think, I mean, I'm housebound and rely on care and stuff. And I always think, Christ, if I was in that country, I wouldn't survive. And this is one of the things which is quite eerie, really. Like, I think Bob Williams was saying about it, you know, we got to challenge, we got to make sure that, you know, this is, because like, this is, we're not a small minorities, you know. Thank you.
Okay, Bob Whitehead. We've got about 14 minutes left according to my clock anyway.
Yeah, we've got to focus our efforts on slashing the emissions in this country where we have leverage and the responsibility to do so. I'm talking about energy production, transport, buildings, industry, agricultural waste, embedded imports, and aviation and shipping. That's the biggies in terms of where we have responsibility to curb the emissions in the UK. but we shouldn't obviously forget the international emissions linked to this country. And in particular, there's one going on at the moment about Mozambique. Now, our very green UK government is intending to invest £1.1 billion in extraction of natural gas in Mozambique. Other countries in Europe are investing in the development of solar panels and renewable energy in Mozambique. But the good old UK wants to invest in turning fossil fuels into liquid natural gas. And there's a big campaign going on at the moment to stop that. Here we can connect with the global south. Now, this campaign is being led by Friends of the Earth at the moment. It's one of their big campaigns. And they're taking the UK government to court on Tuesday. And as part of that, they want people to go outside MP surgeries on Tuesday with placards and slogans saying that this deal has to be cancelled. Now, I do have some links somewhere about all of this, which I'll try and find in a minute and put them in the chat. So here's one thing you can do in the short term. Arrange at very short notice a lobby outside your local MP's surgery with placards and so on, inform the press. This deal with Mozambique has to be cancelled. It's just another example of the lying hypocrisy of our so-called green government. So I'll dig out some links and stick them in the chat for you, okay?
Thank you. Michael Tucker.
Okay. One of the most effective means of mobilisation we've used here locally in Birmingham is a leaflet produced by the Climate Action Network. And it specifies in that in little actions you can take at an individual level for individual change, a local level supporting renewable local companies, lobbying the local council, and then moving to similar actions upscaled to the national and international level. And what I would sort of propose, instead of having this, if you like, slightly neutral, all things to all people kind of leaflet, I'd suggest we'd need something that is eco-socially oriented more explicitly, because I've found this kind of leaflet is an excellent way of publicising this issue whenever we've been in any campaigns locally on this issue. So that's one proposal I would suggest that we could take up. The other thing I would raise is a sort of criticism, really. I appreciate there is much more global protest going on, but I think we still must not underestimate the strength of the opposition from corporations, governments, and if you take the instance of the USA, they've effectively built a political coalition, extremely strong, as I'm sure you're all aware, under Trump, that actually completely opposes climate change. And it's integrated with all the reactionary issues which is supported in the USA. Now, this is maybe the very worst example, but the opposition is strong across the world. Take France, the support you now have with a complete reactionary like Zemmour. You can take third world countries like the Philippines, etc. So do not underestimate the opposition which we face, even though there are encouraging signs of worldwide protest. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, can we take Bob Williams-Finlay and then move on to everyone trying to identify one thing they can do? But let's finish with Bob.
Yeah, I think we've got to raise the slogan, "No one left behind." That we need to include an inclusive checklist when we're looking at the kind of demands, the arguments that we put forward. So that, for instance, when we talk about transport, that make sure we include that it has to be accessible, community-based, and incorporate all people. And finally, just a plug. One way we are trying to get the message over is to incorporate it into what we're doing about transforming social care. So we're talking about a sustainable eco-social approach that provides community-based services, so that enables us to look at lifestyle, because while we don't want to put it all on the individual, I think we've got to look at how we build sustainable communities. And they can be also a place for resistance against the capitalists and cuts to services.
Sorry, Bob, I was just writing away like a crazy thing. Okay, so I think we've got some very good points here. I think the Mozambique action is also something people can cohere around if it works for you in your area. So, hello, Puss. The next thing we need to do is, let's think about, can everyone just take a minute and try and think about one thing that you've got from the discussions we've just had that you want to do, say, in the next fortnight. It might be talking to somebody, it might be getting hold of some of this material and then working out how you can share it with people. I also think the points that were raised earlier about getting involved much more with local groups. I think Stephen's point about building something local and working with other people and making sure that everything you do is actually has an eco-socialist component is pretty important. So can we just take a minute, literally a minute, maybe two. Actually, my timer is set to 2 minutes, so let's take 2 minutes because it means I don't have to reset my timer. And then everyone just briefly say, if you want to, there's no coercion here, but what's one thing you're going to try and do, say, in the next fortnight or the month, just to try and move us forward? Is everyone okay with that? But you could use these hands because it's quicker. Or Bob, if you want to just nod, if that's easier for you. Thank you. Okay, so everyone just take a couple of minutes. I'll put this timer on, and then we'll just quickly get everyone to say what they can do if they're comfortable with sharing it. Then, okay, is that all right with everyone? Right, I'll just put my timer on. We've got apparently.
What's going on?
It was gone in its prime. Got less than a minute left. Breakout. Apparently.
We're going to rejoin
comrade, sorry. I will write to everyone who's been here with a copy of the presentation and with a summary of what people have said, and then we'll talk about a potential meeting soon after that. I think that's the thing to do, and maybe have a regular caucus meeting on this matter if people are up for it. Thank you for sharing that, Francis.
Yeah, I thought we had 10 minutes more than we actually did, but never mind.
So did I. And now I need to work out how to stop recording it. Yeah. There.